Sometimes the most dangerous mistake isn't breaking the law, it's believing you're above the truth. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoed across the quiet morning, cutting through the steady hum of traffic like a blade slicing through glass. For a single heartbeat, everyone on the sidewalk stopped moving. A woman carrying coffee froze halfway across the crosswalk. A delivery driver lowered the package in his hands. Two tourists instinctively raised their phones, sensing that something far bigger than an ordinary police stop was unfolding before their eyes. Standing in the center of the scene was Officer Ethan Walker. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in the dark blue uniform of the Metropolitan Police Department, he wore the kind of expression that came from years of believing his badge settled every argument before it even began. His jaw remained tight, his posture rigid, and his voice carried the unmistakable confidence of a man convinced that authority could never be questioned. Facing him stood another man. His charcoal gray suit was immaculate despite the growing tension surrounding him. His polished shoes reflected the pale morning sunlight, and the small diplomatic lapel pin on his jacket caught the light for only an instant before disappearing beneath Walker's impatient hand. His name was Daniel Brooks. He neither raised his voice nor stepped backward. Instead, he calmly extended a dark passport with a gold emblem pressed into its cover. "Officer," he said evenly, his deep voice carrying no anger, only quiet restraint. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." Walker barely looked at the document. "I've heard that one before." With a rough motion, he slapped the passport aside. It landed on the pavement. A soft gasp rippled through the gathering crowd. Daniel glanced briefly toward the fallen document before returning his eyes to the officer. There was no panic on his face. No fear. Only an almost unsettling calm, as though he understood something that no one else standing there yet realized. "I strongly advise you to read my identification," Daniel continued. Walker laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not the uncertain chuckle of someone reconsidering his decision. It was the confident laugh of a man who believed he had already won. "You people always think fancy papers make you untouchable." Several pedestrians exchanged uncomfortable looks. Someone quietly began recording. Another whispered that the man in the suit hadn't resisted at all. None of it mattered to Walker. His attention had already shifted from investigation to humiliation. "You fit the description," he snapped. "And until I say otherwise, you're just another suspect." Daniel slowly drew a measured breath. "I am a diplomat representing the United States on an international assignment." Walker stepped closer until only inches separated them. "I don't care if you claim you're the president." His hand seized Daniel's wrist. The handcuffs came out. Steel met skin. Click. The sound seemed louder than the city itself. Daniel never struggled. He simply looked directly into Walker's eyes and spoke quietly enough that only those nearest could hear. "This decision will have consequences beyond both of us." Walker tightened the cuffs anyway. "Save the speech." A young woman standing nearby finally found her voice. "Officer, maybe you should listen to him." Walker pointed sharply toward the sidewalk. "Stay out of police business." Silence returned. Cars continued passing only yards away, yet the intersection suddenly felt isolated from the rest of Washington, D.C., as if the entire city were holding its breath. Daniel's phone vibrated inside his jacket. Then again. And again. Walker ignored it. Another vibration. Another incoming call. Without asking permission, Walker reached into Daniel's pocket, pulled out the phone, glanced briefly at the illuminated screen, and scoffed. Unknown government numbers. He pressed the side button. The screen went black. "You're done making calls." Daniel lowered his eyes for only a moment. "You shouldn't have done that." Walker smirked. "What are you going to do about it?" Daniel offered no answer. Instead, he looked past the patrol car toward the far end of the avenue. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Recognition. Far in the distance, the low rumble of powerful engines rolled between the government buildings. Several black SUVs turned onto the avenue in perfect formation. Small blue diplomatic flags fluttered from their front fenders. No sirens. No flashing lights. Just quiet precision. None of the bystanders understood what they were seeing. Neither did Officer Ethan Walker. But within the next few minutes, the badge he had worn with unquestioned pride for nearly 12 years would become the very thing someone far more powerful would demand he surrender. 40 minutes earlier, Washington, D.C. had looked exactly the way the world's capital was supposed to look. The first rays of sunlight reflected off the marble buildings lining Constitution Avenue, turning glass facades into sheets of gold. American flags stirred gently in the summer breeze while diplomats, attorneys, military officers, and federal employees flowed through the streets with quiet purpose. Every corner seemed to carry the weight of decisions capable of shaping nations. Among them walked Daniel Brooks. At first glance, there was nothing flashy about him. No bodyguards. No convoy. No expensive watch displayed for attention. Only a neatly tailored charcoal suit, polished black shoes, and a worn leather briefcase resting comfortably in his right hand. His pace was steady, almost unhurried, the calm rhythm of someone who had learned long ago that true authority never needed to announce itself. People occasionally smiled as they passed him. Daniel returned every greeting with the same quiet warmth. A security guard outside a federal office tipped his cap. "Morning, sir." "Good morning," Daniel answered with an easy smile. His voice carried neither arrogance nor urgency. It reflected years spent solving conflicts with patience rather than confrontation. Few people on the sidewalk knew who he really was. Even fewer understood the significance of the folder resting inside his briefcase. Inside were confidential diplomatic documents prepared for an emergency meeting involving several member states of the United Nations. Weeks of delicate negotiations had led to this morning. Every signature, every paragraph, every carefully chosen word represented months of international cooperation that depended on trust instead of force. Daniel understood the responsibility completely. One careless decision could damage relationships between governments. One reckless misunderstanding could become tomorrow's global headline. That was why he preferred traveling without unnecessary attention. His position had taught him an important lesson. Power hidden behind humility often accomplished far more than power displayed through intimidation. Across the avenue, another morning was beginning very differently. Officer Ethan Walker leaned against his patrol vehicle, sipping lukewarm coffee while scanning the busy intersection. 12 years in uniform had convinced him that instinct mattered more than procedure. His supervisors praised his confidence. His closest friends admired his aggressive style. But buried inside departmental files were complaints that never fully disappeared. Unnecessary force. Disrespect toward civilians. Questionable traffic stops. Bias allegations that somehow always ended without disciplinary action. Each investigation had quietly faded away. Each complaint convinced Walker that he had done nothing wrong. If nobody can prove it, he often told younger officers, then it never happened. His rookie partner, Officer Ryan Collins, stood nearby reviewing reports on a tablet. Unlike Walker, Ryan still believed every encounter deserved patience before judgment. He noticed Daniel approaching the intersection. "Looks like another government employee heading toward the diplomatic district," Ryan observed. Walker barely glanced up. "You can never tell these days." Daniel stopped at the pedestrian signal, waiting alongside several strangers. A mother pushed a stroller. A young lawyer adjusted her briefcase. 2 foreign visitors studied a city map. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary. Then Walker's radio crackled to life. "Unit 12, be advised. Report of a possible suspect matching witness description in the Constitution Avenue area." The transmission was brief. Incomplete. Missing critical details. Walker looked up again. His eyes landed directly on Daniel. The calm man in the charcoal suit. The black diplomat. Patiently waiting for the light to change. Without asking another question. Without requesting additional information. Without confirming the description. Walker placed his unfinished coffee on the hood of the patrol car. His expression hardened. In his mind, the decision had already been made. Sometimes history changes because of complicated political decisions. Sometimes it changes because one man looks at another, and chooses prejudice over proof. Officer Ethan Walker stepped off the curb before the pedestrian signal had even changed. His boots struck the asphalt with deliberate confidence, each step carrying the quiet certainty of a man who believed hesitation was weakness. The morning traffic slowed as drivers noticed a uniformed officer walking directly toward the crosswalk, his eyes fixed on a single person. Daniel Brooks. The surrounding crowd instinctively shifted aside. Daniel noticed the officer approaching long before a word was spoken. He remained exactly where he was. Calm. Patient. His leather briefcase rested against his leg while the traffic light counted down the final seconds before pedestrians could cross. Sir. Walker's voice was sharp enough to turn several heads. I need you to step over here. Daniel looked at him politely. Good morning, officer. Walker ignored the greeting. I asked you a question. I heard you, Daniel replied evenly. May I ask the reason for the stop? The question seemed to irritate Walker far more than it should have. You don't ask the questions. Several nearby pedestrians slowed their pace. An elderly couple paused near a newspaper stand. A cyclist removed one earbud. Even Ryan Collins, still standing beside the patrol vehicle, frowned slightly as he watched the encounter unfold. Daniel nodded respectfully. Very well. Without making any sudden movements, he slowly reached inside his jacket. Walker's hand immediately moved toward his holster. Easy. Daniel froze instantly. My identification, he explained. Walker said nothing. After a brief pause, Daniel carefully removed a dark diplomatic passport along with an official identification card protected inside a leather credential holder. He held them out with both hands. My name is Daniel Brooks. Walker glanced at the documents for less than a second. He never actually read them. Instead, his attention drifted to Daniel's face. To his skin. To the expensive suit. To the confidence with which he carried himself. A crooked smile appeared on Walker's face. That's a nice costume. Daniel blinked once. I'm sorry. The suit. Walker shrugged. The briefcase. He tilted his head. The fake government credentials. Ryan took one cautious step closer. Ethan. Walker waved him silent. Daniel remained composed. Officer, these credentials were issued by the United States Department of State. I'm sure they were. Walker folded his arms. And I'm sure you're about to tell me you're some kind of ambassador. A few people nearby exchanged uneasy glances. No one laughed. The silence itself felt uncomfortable. Daniel spoke carefully, choosing every word with measured precision. I am requesting that you verify my credentials through the appropriate diplomatic channels. Walker chuckled. You people always have a fancy explanation. The words lingered in the air. Ryan's expression tightened. He noticed Daniel's diplomatic passport again. The embossed seal. The official numbering. Everything looked genuine. Ethan, Ryan said quietly, maybe we should call dispatch. Walker didn't even look at him. I don't need dispatch to tell me what's right in front of me. Daniel slowly lowered his identification. There was no anger in his face. No visible frustration. Only disappointment. I would strongly encourage you not to continue down this path, officer. Walker stepped closer until they were barely a foot apart. Is that a threat? No. Daniel answered immediately. It is a warning. The intersection fell strangely quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause between the government buildings. For the first time, Daniel's eyes briefly moved beyond Walker's shoulder. Far down the avenue. Toward something approaching in the distance. His expression remained calm. But there was unmistakable recognition. Walker mistook it for surrender. Hands behind your back. Daniel looked directly into the officer's eyes. I respectfully declined to resist. Walker smirked. As if you had a choice. Neither man realized that dozens of cameras had already begun recording. And somewhere inside the United Nations headquarters only a few miles away, an urgent phone call had just reached the office of a senior ambassador, one that would transform an ordinary traffic stop into an international diplomatic crisis before the morning was over. Daniel slowly placed his hands behind his back. Not because he accepted the accusation. Not because he agreed with the officer. But because decades of diplomatic service had taught him that sometimes dignity spoke louder than resistance. Officer Ethan Walker interpreted the silence as surrender. There you go, he said with a satisfied grin. Now you're starting to cooperate. The steel handcuffs closed around Daniel's wrists with a sharp metallic click. For a moment, no one moved. The entire intersection seemed suspended in uneasy silence. Ryan Collins stepped closer, lowering his voice. Ethan, maybe we should verify his credentials before we do this. Walker never took his eyes off Daniel. I've already made my decision. Ryan glanced at the diplomatic passport lying on the pavement. Its dark cover had fallen open just enough to reveal an official seal embossed in gold. It didn't look fake. It looked exactly like the credentials issued to senior representatives of the United States. Ethan, Ryan insisted quietly, this doesn't feel right. Walker shrugged. You've been wearing that badge for 6 months. I've been wearing mine for 12 years. I know what I'm looking at. Daniel finally spoke. Officer Collins is offering reasonable advice. Walker immediately cut him off. You don't get to tell us how to do our jobs. Daniel nodded once. I wasn't trying to. A young woman standing near the crosswalk raised her phone. She wasn't the only one. Within seconds, more people began recording. A businessman whispered to his colleague. That man hasn't argued once. Another bystander frowned. If he's lying, why would he keep asking them to verify his identification? The question spread quietly through the crowd. Walker ignored every one of them. He reached for Daniel's leather briefcase. What's in here? Confidential diplomatic documents. Walker laughed. Convenient answer. He tried opening the case. It wouldn't unlock. Daniel remained perfectly calm. It is protected under diplomatic protocol. Walker looked directly into his eyes. Not anymore. He tugged harder. The reinforced locks held. His frustration became visible. You really think those fancy rules apply out here? Daniel answered with complete composure. They apply everywhere. Walker shook his head. Not on my street. Ryan noticed another detail. Daniel's phone continued vibrating inside his jacket pocket. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each call lasted only seconds before another immediately appeared. Ryan caught a glimpse of the screen. Every incoming call displayed the same official government designation. No personal contacts. No ordinary numbers. Government offices. Ethan. Walker reached into Daniel's pocket before Ryan could finish. He removed the phone. The display illuminated his face. Several notifications filled the screen. Department of State. Diplomatic Security Service. Executive Communications. Walker rolled his eyes. Quite an imagination. Without another thought, he pressed the power button until the screen went dark. There. No more interruptions. Daniel watched quietly. His expression never changed. You have just declined several calls that were not intended for me alone. Walker slipped the phone into his own pocket. I'll decide what's important. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a slow, measured breath. I sincerely hope, he said, that one day you understand the difference between authority and judgment. Walker smirked. Save the philosophy. Then, from somewhere beyond the line of government buildings, a low convoy engine echoed across the avenue. Heads turned almost simultaneously. Black SUVs. Perfect formation. No flashing lights. No sirens. Only quiet precision. The small blue diplomatic flags mounted on the front fenders fluttered gently in the morning breeze. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Daniel simply closed his eyes for a brief moment. He had been expecting them. Officer Ethan Walker, however, still believed the morning belonged to him. He had no idea that every decision he had made over the past 5 minutes was about to be witnessed by people whose authority reached far beyond the limits of his badge. The convoy came to a silent stop. Four black SUVs lined the curb with practiced precision, their engines settling into a low mechanical hum. There were no flashing lights. No shouting agents. No dramatic rush. Only discipline. Only purpose. Every conversation on the sidewalk faded away. Pedestrians instinctively stepped backward, creating a corridor without anyone asking them to. Even those who had been recording lowered their phones for a moment, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Officer Ryan Collins stared at the blue diplomatic flags mounted on the vehicles. His heartbeat quickened. Ethan. Walker never turned around. What now? I think you need to see this. Walker sighed impatiently. If it's another lawyer, they can wait. The first SUV door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out, scanning the area with calm, professional eyes. Then another. And another. None carried visible weapons. None raised their voices. Yet their quiet confidence carried more authority than any shouted command. Daniel recognized them immediately. He simply inclined his head in acknowledgement. Walker noticed the exchange. So, he said with a sarcastic grin, your friends finally showed up. Daniel answered softly. They're not here for me. Walker laughed. They sure aren't here for you in those handcuffs. The second vehicle door opened. A distinguished woman in her 60s emerged. Her silver hair was neatly arranged. Her navy suit was understated but impeccably tailored. She walked with measured confidence, her eyes fixed entirely on Daniel. Every member of the diplomatic security detail stepped aside to let her pass. Ryan quietly swallowed. He recognized her face from televised international conferences. Before he could speak, the woman reached Daniel. Ambassador Brooks. Her voice remained calm. Are you injured? Daniel offered a reassuring smile. I'm unharmed. She glanced briefly at the handcuffs before returning her attention to him. I'm sorry you were kept waiting. Walker frowned. Excuse me, ma'am. The woman slowly turned toward him. Can I help you? Walker pointed toward Daniel. This individual is currently under investigation. Her expression never changed. No. She answered with quiet certainty. He is currently under diplomatic protection. Walker folded his arms. Not according to my investigation. The woman studied him for several seconds. What exactly did you investigate? Walker hesitated for the first time. He matched a description. Did you verify his credentials? No. Did you contact the Department of State? No. Did you notify diplomatic security? No. Each answer seemed smaller than the one before. The silence between questions became heavier. Ryan lowered his eyes. He already knew where this conversation was heading. The ambassador took one slow step forward. "My name is Ambassador Catherine Reynolds." She reached into her portfolio and presented official identification. "I serve as the United States Permanent Representative to the United Nations." Walker's confident expression faltered. Only slightly. Still unwilling to retreat, he gestured toward Daniel. "That doesn't change the fact that he's detained." Ambassador Reynolds looked at Daniel's wrists. Then she looked directly into Walker's eyes. "It changes everything." A member of the diplomatic security team quietly approached Ryan and requested the body camera footage. Another began photographing the scene without speaking. The atmosphere shifted completely. Minutes earlier, Walker had controlled every conversation. Now he was no longer directing events. He was answering for them. Daniel remained perfectly composed throughout. He neither celebrated nor protested. He simply waited. Because he understood something Walker still refused to accept. Real authority never needed to prove itself. It simply arrived. And when it did, every false certainty began to collapse under the weight of the truth. Officer Ethan Walker forced a smile. It was the same smile he had worn countless times before when someone questioned his authority. Only this time, it looked different. Less confident. Less certain. He glanced from Ambassador Catherine Reynolds to Daniel Brooks and back again, searching for something that would restore the control he could feel slipping away. "I don't care who you are," Walker said. "My investigation isn't over." Ambassador Reynolds remained perfectly composed. "No, officer. It ended the moment you refused to verify the identity of an accredited diplomat." Walker crossed his arms. He was acting suspiciously. Daniel finally spoke. "I was waiting for a pedestrian signal." Walker ignored him. He reached into his jacket. "I informed you I was retrieving my identification. You could have been reaching for anything." Ryan Collins quietly interrupted. "He told you exactly what he was doing." Walker shot him a cold stare. "I wasn't asking for your opinion." Ryan fell silent, but his expression revealed growing regret. The ambassador extended her hand toward Daniel. "May I see your credentials?" Daniel nodded. "They're on the ground." One member of the diplomatic security team carefully retrieved the passport from the pavement, brushed away the dust, and handed it to Ambassador Reynolds. She opened it slowly. Every page was pristine. Every seal was authentic. Every signature had been verified months before by the United States Department of State. She closed the passport and looked directly at Walker. "This passport carries full diplomatic status." She removed another document from her portfolio. "This identification confirms Ambassador Brooks is serving as a special envoy on an official United Nations assignment under diplomatic immunity." The words landed with unmistakable weight. Several people in the crowd exchanged stunned looks. Someone whispered, "Did she just say diplomatic immunity?" Another person lowered their phone in disbelief. Walker still refused to move. "That doesn't mean he can't be investigated." "It does," Ambassador Reynolds replied calmly, "mean that you cannot detain him as you have done." Before Walker could answer, another black sedan stopped behind the convoy. Two officials exited the vehicle. One displayed credentials from the United States Department of State. The other identified himself as the Regional Director of Diplomatic Security. Neither appeared surprised. As though they had already been fully briefed before arriving. The Diplomatic Security Director approached Daniel first. "Ambassador Brooks." Daniel smiled politely. "It's good to see you, Michael. I'm sorry we couldn't get here sooner." Walker felt his stomach tighten. These people knew Daniel personally. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a bluff. Everything Daniel had calmly stated from the very beginning had been true. The director slowly turned toward Walker. "Officer. Who authorized this detention? Walker hesitated. I did. Based on what evidence? He matched a description. Did you verify his diplomatic credentials? No. Did you contact diplomatic security? No. Did you notify your supervisor before placing a protected diplomat in restraints? Walker said nothing. The silence answered for him. The director looked toward Ryan. Officer Collins. Ryan stood a little straighter. Sir. Was there any resistance? No, sir. Any threats? No, sir. Any attempt to flee? No, sir. Each answer stripped away another layer of Walker's justification. Daniel remained exactly as he had been since the beginning. Calm. Respectful. Patient. He never demanded special treatment. He had only asked for one simple thing. Verification. The very procedure designed to prevent moments like this. Ambassador Reynolds stepped beside Daniel once more. Then, with quiet authority that echoed across the silent intersection, she delivered the sentence that instantly changed the balance of power. Officer Walker. She looked directly at the handcuffs still locked around Daniel's wrists. Remove those restraints. Her gaze never left his. And when you finish, we are going to discuss what happens to your badge. The words hung over the intersection like a final verdict. Remove those restraints. For the first time that morning, Officer Ethan Walker did not respond immediately. His fingers remained motionless near his duty belt. The confidence that had carried him through every decision over the last several minutes was gone, replaced by something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. Around him, the atmosphere had completely changed. The crowd was no longer watching a routine police stop. They were witnessing the collapse of a mistake that should never have happened. Ryan Collins quietly stepped closer. Ethan. His voice was barely above a whisper. Take the cuffs off. Walker looked toward his partner. Then toward Ambassador Reynolds. Then at Daniel Brooks. Daniel's posture had never changed. His shoulders remained straight. His breathing remained steady. Even now, with cameras pointed in every direction, he showed no anger. No satisfaction. No desire to embarrass the officer standing before him. He simply waited. Because patience had always been stronger than pride. After several long seconds, Walker reached for the handcuff key. The metal clicked softly. One bracelet opened. Then the other. Daniel slowly lowered his hands. Deep red marks circled both wrists, the only visible reminder of everything that had happened. I'm sorry about this, Ambassador Brooks, Ryan said quietly. Daniel offered him a small nod. You acted with professionalism. Those few words struck Ryan harder than any accusation could have. He knew he had spoken up. But he also knew he had not spoken loudly enough. Meanwhile, the director of diplomatic security stepped beside Walker. Officer Walker. Walker looked up. I'm placing you under formal administrative review pending the arrival of your department command staff. Walker frowned. You don't have authority over my department. No. The director answered calmly. But your department will have authority over you. Almost on cue, another convoy entered the avenue. This one carried the insignia of the Metropolitan Police Department. A black command vehicle stopped behind the patrol car. Deputy Chief Laura Bennett stepped out. The moment she saw Ambassador Reynolds, Daniel Brooks, the diplomatic security officials, and nearly 100 witnesses gathered around the scene, her expression darkened. She walked directly toward Walker. What happened here? Walker immediately began speaking. I had probable, Bennett raised one hand. Not another word. She turned toward Ambassador Reynolds first. Ambassador, on behalf of this department, I sincerely apologize. Reynolds nodded politely. I appreciate that, Chief. Bennett then faced Daniel. Ambassador Brooks, I am deeply sorry for what you have experienced this morning. Daniel answered with remarkable composure. I accept your apology. There was no bitterness in his voice. Only quiet dignity. Bennett slowly looked back at Walker. Officer. Remove your body camera. Walker blinked. Ma'am. Now. He obeyed. The deputy chief accepted the camera and handed it directly to an internal affairs investigator who had just arrived. Then she looked at Walker's chest. At the silver badge that had represented public trust for more than a decade. Her next words were calm. Measured. Impossible to misunderstand. Officer Ethan Walker. Effective immediately, you are relieved of duty pending investigation. Walker felt the blood drain from his face. But, Chief, she interrupted him one final time. Hand me your badge. The intersection fell silent once again. Slowly. Almost mechanically. Walker unclipped the badge from his uniform. The piece of silver he had believed gave him unquestioned authority rested in the palm of his hand for only a second before he surrendered it. Daniel watched quietly. Not with triumph. Not with revenge. But with the solemn understanding that justice was never about humiliating another human being. It was about ensuring that no badge, no title, and no position of power could ever stand above accountability. By noon, the story had spread far beyond the streets of Washington. The videos recorded by witnesses had already reached millions of screens. Every angle captured the same sequence. A calm black diplomat presenting official credentials. A police officer refusing to verify them. Handcuffs. A diplomatic convoy. The arrival of Ambassador Catherine Reynolds. And finally, a badge being surrendered in complete silence. Inside the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police Department, the atmosphere was nothing like an ordinary workday. Conference rooms filled with command staff. Internal affairs investigators reviewed body camera footage frame by frame. Department attorneys quietly took notes. No one argued about what had happened. The recordings spoke for themselves. Deputy Chief Laura Bennett addressed the room. This investigation will follow every policy. No shortcuts. No exceptions. We owe that to the public. Across the city, the Department of State issued a formal statement confirming that Ambassador Daniel Brooks had been traveling under official diplomatic authority while carrying materials related to an international United Nations assignment. The statement remained measured. Professional. It demanded accountability, not retaliation. At United Nations headquarters, Ambassador Catherine Reynolds stood before a room crowded with reporters. Microphones covered the podium. Camera shutters clicked without pause. A journalist raised the first question. Ambassador Reynolds, is the United Nations demanding criminal charges? She answered without hesitation. The purpose of diplomacy is not revenge. It is responsibility. Another reporter asked, has Ambassador Brooks requested compensation? She gave a small smile. No. He requested something much more important. What was that? That every officer receives proper training so this never happens to another innocent person. The room became noticeably quieter. Across the hall, Daniel Brooks waited away from the cameras. He had declined multiple television interviews. He had refused exclusive media offers. He had no interest in becoming the center of a political spectacle. Ryan Collins found him standing beside a large window overlooking the city. For a moment, neither man spoke. Finally Ryan broke the silence. I should have stopped it. Daniel looked at him with kindness rather than judgment. You tried. I didn't try hard enough. Ryan lowered his head. Daniel rested a gentle hand on his shoulder. Doing the right thing is rarely measured by whether you succeed. It is measured by whether you choose to stand for it. Ryan absorbed every word. He realized the greatest lesson of the day had not come from a police academy. It had come from the very man his department had failed to protect. Meanwhile, Officer Ethan Walker sat alone in an administrative office. His uniform shirt remained neatly pressed. But the space above his left pocket was empty. The missing badge seemed louder than any accusation. For the first time in 12 years, no one saluted him. No one asked for his decision. No one looked to him for authority. He stared at the faint outline where the badge had rested every day of his career. Only then did he begin to understand something that Daniel Brooks had known from the very beginning. Authority can be taken away in a single moment. Character cannot. Outside, life continued as it always had. Traffic moved through the city. Diplomatic meetings resumed. The world kept turning. But for everyone who had witnessed that morning, one truth remained impossible to forget. Respect is never created by the power to place handcuffs on another person. It is earned by the wisdom to know when not to. Several weeks later, the intersection looked exactly as it always had. Morning commuters hurried toward government buildings. Diplomatic vehicles moved quietly through the city. Tourists stopped to photograph monuments without knowing that only days earlier, this ordinary stretch of pavement had become the center of an international lesson about power, prejudice, and accountability. Nothing on the street remembered what had happened. But the people did. Inside the Metropolitan Police Academy, a new training session had just begun. Rows of rookie officers watched body camera footage from the incident. Not to shame anyone. Not to satisfy public outrage. But to learn. Deputy Chief Laura Bennett stood before the class. She allowed the final frame to remain frozen on the large screen. Officer Ethan Walker removing his own badge. No policy manual, she said quietly, can replace good judgment. She looked around the room. Every person you stop has a story you cannot see. Every decision you make represents more than yourself. It represents every officer who wears this uniform. The room remained silent. Every recruit understood the weight of those words. Across town, Ambassador Daniel Brooks returned to his work as though nothing extraordinary had happened. International meetings resumed. Peace negotiations continued. Humanitarian agreements moved forward. He never mentioned the arrest. During official discussions. Never used it to gain sympathy. Never allowed one officer's failure to define his view of an entire profession. One afternoon, Ryan Collins requested a private meeting. When Daniel entered the quiet courtyard outside the State Department, Ryan stood waiting. "I wanted to thank you," Ryan said. Daniel smiled. "For what?" "For showing me what leadership really looks like." Daniel looked toward the American flag moving gently above the building. Leadership isn't measured by how much authority we possess. It's measured by how we choose to use it. Ryan nodded slowly. "I won't forget. I'm counting on that." Months later, the department officially announced expanded training on professional conduct, implicit bias, diplomatic protocol, and constitutional policing. The program carried no individual's name. It wasn't created to preserve anyone's reputation. It existed to protect the next innocent person from experiencing the same injustice. As for Ethan Walker, his career had become a reminder discussed in classrooms instead of roll calls. His greatest mistake had not been making an incorrect assumption. It had been refusing every opportunity to question that assumption. Because truth had knocked more than once. In a diplomatic passport. In his partner's warning. In repeated government calls. In a respectful request for verification. He ignored every one of them. Daniel Brooks never celebrated what followed. He understood that another person's downfall could never be the foundation of justice. Justice was something quieter. Something stronger. It corrected without hatred. It held power accountable without forgetting humanity. As the sun disappeared behind the Washington skyline, Daniel paused for a brief moment before entering another diplomatic meeting. He adjusted his jacket. Straightened the same lapel pin that had gone unnoticed on the morning of his arrest. Then he walked forward with the same calm confidence he had carried from the beginning. Because titles fade. Badges change hands. Positions come and go. But dignity remains with those who refuse to surrender it. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. A badge can command obedience. A uniform can project authority. But only character earns lasting respect. Because the strongest form of justice is not the power to arrest someone. It is the courage to recognize another person's humanity before deciding who they are.